The night I saw them together, I thought it was a coincidence. By sunrise, I realized it was the beginning of the end. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and for nearly 40 years, I believe that every secret inside Whitmore Manor eventually found its way into the light. I was wrong. Some secrets were protected by wealth, some were protected by fear, and some were protected by the people you trusted most. The old mansion sat on a hill overlooking more than 200 acres of rolling countryside in upstate New York. Generations of the Whitmore family had lived there. The stone walls, the grand windows, the oak-paneled halls. They had witnessed weddings, funerals, celebrations, and betrayals long before I arrived. At 69, I thought there was very little left that could surprise me. That belief disappeared on a cold Thursday night in October. I woke shortly after midnight. The grandfather clock downstairs had just struck 12. Sleep had become difficult over the past few years. The house felt different now. Quieter. Heavier. The kind of silence that seemed to carry conversations you could not quite hear. I slipped on my cardigan and left my bedroom. The hallway was dark except for a few antique wall sconces casting soft golden light across the floor. As I reached the top of the staircase, I noticed something unusual. A light was on inside the library. That alone would not have been strange. But at that hour, everyone should have been asleep. I paused. Then I heard voices. Low, careful, almost whispered. Slowly, I walked down the staircase. The massive dining room stretched before me, empty beneath its crystal chandelier. The long oak table seemed even larger in the darkness. Beyond it, through partially open library doors, I could see two figures. Isabel stood beside the fireplace, elegant as always. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect control. Across from her stood Thomas Grayson, our family attorney. He held a thick envelope under one arm. Neither of them noticed me. Everything must be finalized before David finds out, Isabel said quietly. Thomas adjusted his glasses. If anyone asks questions, the documentation will appear completely legitimate. My heart skipped. Finalized? Documentation? Questions? I moved closer, careful not to make a sound. Isabel accepted the envelope and slipped it into her leather portfolio. Good, she said. The fewer people involved, the better. Then Thomas said something that made my stomach tighten. And Harrison? Isabel's expression hardened for only a second. Leave Harrison to me. A floorboard creaked beneath my foot. Both heads turned instantly toward the doorway. I stepped back into the shadows before either of them could see me clearly. Moments later, I heard the library door close. Their conversation was over. I returned upstairs without making a sound. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed staring into the darkness. Maybe it was business. Maybe it was nothing. That was what I told myself. But deep down, I already knew something was wrong. Because in all the years I had known Isabel Whitmore, she never held secret meetings after midnight unless she was protecting something or hiding it. And before the next evening arrived, I would discover that whatever had passed between her and Thomas was connected to a secret capable of tearing the Whitmore family apart. I barely slept for the rest of the night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Isabel standing beside the library fireplace with that calm expression she wore whenever she believed she was in complete control. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I was already awake. The sky beyond my bedroom window was pale gray, and a thin layer of autumn fog drifted across the Whitmore estate. I dressed slowly and made my way downstairs. The familiar scent of coffee filled the kitchen. For a moment, everything appeared normal. That was the unsettling part. Secrets rarely announce themselves. They hid inside ordinary mornings. When I entered the dining room, the long oak table was already set for breakfast. David sat near one end, staring at his phone. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. He looked exhausted. Across from him, Isabel poured coffee with effortless grace. Her movements were smooth, controlled, perfect. If she had spent part of the previous night in a secret meeting with Thomas Grayson, nobody would have guessed it. Harrison occupied his usual seat near the far end of the table. His weathered denim shirt looked out of place among the polished silver and expensive china. He quietly stirred his coffee without saying a word. Ethan arrived a few minutes later carrying a laptop under one arm. He greeted everyone politely before taking a seat. Something about his expression caught my attention. He seemed distracted, observant, almost as though he had noticed changes in the house as well. The conversation remained shallow. Isabel guided it carefully from topic to topic. upcoming charity events, business meetings, renovations planned for one of the guest cottages. Every subject felt selected in advance. Every answer seemed rehearsed. Then something unusual happened. David asked a simple question about family trust documents. It should not have meant anything. Yet I noticed Isabel glance toward him for only a fraction of a second. The reaction was tiny, almost invisible, but it was there. Thomas's name surfaced briefly during the discussion. Isabel immediately redirected the conversation elsewhere. David did not seem to notice. Ethan did. I watched his eyes narrow slightly before he looked down at his plate. Across the room, James entered carrying additional coffee. The loyal house manager had worked for the Whitmores for more than 20 years. Normally, he moved with quiet confidence. This morning, however, he appeared uneasy. As he set down the coffee pot, he glanced toward Isabel and quickly looked away. Another small detail. Another piece that did not fit. After breakfast ended, everyone scattered throughout the estate. Yet the strange feeling remained. The house itself seemed different now. Beneath the polished floors, beneath the family traditions, beneath the carefully maintained image of wealth and stability, something was shifting. And as I stood alone beside the dining room window watching the fog lift from the grounds, I realized I was not the only person beginning to sense it. Ethan was watching too. And whatever Isabel was hiding, it was becoming harder to keep buried. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly, but the silence inside Whitmore Manor no longer felt peaceful. It felt calculated. Every hallway seemed to hold unfinished conversations. Every closed door felt intentional. I spent most of the day in the sunroom overlooking the eastern gardens, pretending to read while my thoughts returned again and again to the meeting I had witnessed and the strange breakfast that followed. Shortly after 3 o'clock, I went looking for an old photo album stored in a cabinet near the library. The album itself was unimportant. What caught my attention was the cabinet beside it. One of the drawers was slightly open. That was unusual. The household staff was meticulous, and James especially never left anything out of place. I pulled the drawer open another inch. Empty file folders sat inside. Several labels had been removed recently, leaving pale rectangular marks where they had once been attached. I frowned. The family archives had always been organized with almost obsessive precision. Missing labels meant someone wanted certain records harder to find. As I stood there, footsteps approached. I quietly closed the drawer. James appeared carrying a small stack of correspondence. For a brief moment, surprise crossed his face when he saw me standing beside the cabinet. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said politely. "I did not realize anyone was in here." I smiled. Neither did I. His expression softened, but not completely. Before leaving, he glanced toward the cabinet. It was only a second, yet it confirmed something important. He knew those files mattered. Later that evening, another strange incident occurred. Ethan entered the dining room carrying his laptop and several folders. He looked frustrated. "Has anyone seen a blue file marked property trusts?" he asked. David barely looked up from his phone. Isabel answered immediately. "Too quickly. You probably misplaced it." Ethan hesitated. "I had it yesterday." Isabel offered a pleasant smile. "Then I am sure it will turn up." Nobody said anything else. Yet I noticed Harrison watching the exchange from across the room. He did not speak. He simply observed, the same way he had observed everything for years. After dinner, Ethan stopped me near the staircase. His voice was low. "Grandma, have you noticed anything strange lately?" The question caught me off guard. I studied his face. He was serious, more serious than I had ever seen him. For a moment, I considered telling him everything. Instead, I asked a question of my own. "What makes you ask that?" Ethan glanced toward the library before answering. "Because documents do not disappear on their own." Then he walked away. I stood there watching him climb the staircase. My pulse quickened. Ethan was no longer simply curious. He was investigating. And somewhere inside this enormous house, someone was working very hard to make sure certain pieces of the family history stayed hidden. That night, after Ethan's question, I found myself unable to focus on anything else. The house had settled into its usual evening rhythm. Doors closed softly. Footsteps faded. Lamps glowed behind heavy curtains. From the outside, Whitmore Manor looked exactly as it always had. Stable, elegant, untouchable. Yet beneath that polished surface, something was unraveling. I could feel it. Around 9 o'clock, I retreated to a small sitting room on the second floor, one of the few places in the house that still felt untouched by tension. An old cedar chest stood beneath the window. Inside were family photographs, letters, and keepsakes collected over decades. I had not opened it in years. Slowly, I began sorting through the contents. There was David as a young boy standing beside his grandfather at a fishing dock in Maine. Ethan at 10 years old holding a science fair trophy. Family Christmas cards. Handwritten notes. Pieces of a history that suddenly felt fragile. Then I found a photograph that made me stop. It had been taken nearly 25 years earlier. The entire family stood on the front steps of the manor. Everyone was smiling. Everyone looked united. Yet as I studied the picture, I realized how much had changed. Back then, decisions were discussed openly. Questions were answered directly. Trust had not required investigation. My late husband used to say that secrets were expensive. Eventually, someone always paid for them. At the time, I thought he was talking about business. Now I was no longer sure. The following morning, I woke early and walked through the east hallway toward the library. As I approached, voices drifted through the partially closed door. I recognized one immediately. Thomas Grayson. The second voice belonged to David. I stopped. Neither man sounded angry. In fact, David sounded confused. "I do not understand why these records are unavailable," he said. "They have always been available before." There was a brief silence. Then Thomas replied carefully, "Certain files are being reorganized." Reorganized? The explanation felt thin. Even David seemed unconvinced. A chair moved across the floor. Footsteps approached the door. I continued walking before either man could see me standing there. Later that afternoon, another detail caught my attention. Isabel received a phone call while crossing the main foyer. The moment she noticed Ethan descending the staircase, she ended the conversation mid-sentence. Her smile appeared instantly. Too instantly. Ethan noticed it too. Neither of them said anything. But the look they exchanged lasted long enough to confirm what I had begun to suspect. Whatever was happening inside Whitmore Manor was no longer hidden from just one person. The circle of doubt was growing. And sooner or later, someone was going to uncover the truth buried beneath all those missing documents. 2 days later, the first Real crack appeared. It happened on a rainy afternoon while most of the family was occupied elsewhere. The steady sound of rain tapped against the tall windows of Whitmore Manor, and the house felt unusually quiet. I was crossing the main hallway when I noticed Ethan entering the old records room near the west wing. Normally, the room remained locked, but the door stood slightly open. Curiosity led me closer. Through the narrow gap, I saw Ethan examining several storage boxes stacked on a large wooden table. Papers were spread around him in careful rows. He was not searching randomly. He was looking for something specific. Before I could announce myself, another voice spoke from inside the room. "I thought I might find you here." It was Sophia Bennett. I had met her only a handful of times. Over the years, she was a young attorney who occasionally assisted Thomas with research projects. Ethan looked relieved to see her. Sophia placed a folder on the table and lowered her voice. "I found something strange in the county records office." Ethan immediately closed the box he had been searching. "What kind of strange?" Sophia opened the folder. Several trust amendments were filed over the last 18 months. "The problem is that nobody seems willing to explain why." My heart began to pound. Through the doorway, I could see Ethan carefully reviewing the documents. His expression grew more serious with each page. "These signatures are familiar," he said quietly. "But some of these filing dates do not make sense." Sophia nodded. "That is exactly why I came here." Neither of them noticed me standing outside. I remained perfectly still. The rain continued falling against the windows while the pieces slowly began to move into place. Missing files, secret meetings, altered records, trust amendments. None of it felt accidental anymore. Then Sophia pulled out one final document. "There is one more thing," she said. "This amendment references a supplemental agreement that should be attached. But the attachment is missing." Ethan looked up immediately. "Missing from where?" "Everywhere," Sophia replied. Silence filled the room. Even from the hallway, I could sense the significance of what she had just revealed. Ethan leaned back in his chair and stared at the document. Someone removed it. Sophia did not answer. She did not need to. Both of them already knew. As I quietly stepped away from the doorway, one thought echoed through my mind. Whatever was hidden inside that missing agreement was important enough for someone to erase every trace of it. And if Ethan and Sophia were getting this close to the truth, whoever had been protecting that secret would not remain comfortable for much longer. The discovery of the missing agreement changed everything. Not because we knew what it contained, but because we now knew someone had gone to considerable effort to make it disappear. The next morning, a heavy cloud cover hung over the estate, turning the sprawling grounds gray and subdued. At breakfast, the atmosphere felt noticeably different. Nobody mentioned trust documents. Nobody mentioned missing files. Yet the silence itself seemed louder than conversation. Ethan barely touched his food. Sophia had not returned to the manor, but her findings lingered over the table like an invisible guest. David appeared distracted, repeatedly checking messages on his phone. Isabel remained composed. She discussed a charity luncheon scheduled for the following week and commented on landscaping plans near the South Gardens. To anyone unfamiliar with the family, she would have seemed perfectly at ease. But I had begun noticing the tiny details. The slight pause before certain answers. The careful way she redirected discussions. The way her eyes moved whenever someone unexpectedly mentioned legal matters. Harrison sat quietly near the end of the table, drinking coffee. He rarely participated in family conversations, yet I noticed something unusual. He was listening more closely than usual. Every time Isabel spoke, his expression became a little harder to read. Later that afternoon, I found Ethan alone in the library. Several books lay open across the large oak desk. Old trust records, property transfers, family correspondence. He looked exhausted. "Have you found anything?" I asked gently. Ethan leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "Not enough," he admitted. "But there is a pattern." He slid a folder toward me. Inside were copies of amendments filed over several years. Most appeared routine. Then he pointed to a sequence of dates. These changes accelerated during the last 18 months. I studied the pages. He was right. Small modifications. Technical language. Minor adjustments that seemed insignificant on their own. Together, however, they formed something much larger. "Someone has been preparing for something," Ethan said quietly. Before I could respond, a soft knock sounded at the library door. James stepped inside. His usually calm face appeared troubled. He closed the door behind him and lowered his voice. "There is something both of you should know." Ethan immediately sat forward. James hesitated, as though weighing whether he should continue. Then he spoke words that sent a chill through the room. "The missing agreement is not the only document that disappeared." For several seconds, nobody said anything. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows. Inside, an even more unsettling realization began to take shape. Whatever secret was buried within the Whitmore family records was far larger than any of us had imagined. James remained standing beside the library door, his hands folded in front of him. In more than 20 years, I had rarely seen him look uncertain. That alone told me the situation was serious. Ethan was the first to speak. "What other documents disappeared?" James glanced toward the hallway before answering. "Several older records connected to the family trust. Not all of them vanished at the same time. Some disappeared years ago, others more recently." Ethan exchanged a look with me. That changed everything. Missing files could be explained away as mistakes. A pattern stretching across years could not. James stepped closer and lowered his voice. "I only noticed because I helped organize the archives after your grandfather passed away. Certain records were always there. Then one day they were not." "Did you tell anyone?" I asked. James nodded slowly. "I mentioned it once. I was told the files had been moved for legal review." The room fell silent. We all understood what that meant. Somebody had provided an explanation designed to end further questions. Ethan stood and walked toward one of the tall windows overlooking the north lawn. Rain clouds still drifted across the property. "Who had access?" he asked. James hesitated. "Very few people." He stopped there. He did not need to continue. We all knew which names belonged on that list. Before anyone could speak again, a voice sounded from the hallway. "Isabel." Instantly, James straightened. Ethan closed the folders scattered across the desk. By the time Isabel entered the library, the conversation had vanished behind polite smiles. "I hope I am not interrupting," she said warmly. Her tone was flawless, her expression calm, yet something felt different. For the first time, I noticed a trace of tension behind her. Confidence. Her eyes briefly moved across the desk, studying the closed folders before settling on Ethan. "Working hard?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "Just organizing some family records." Isabel nodded. "That sounds exciting." The remark should have sounded harmless. Instead, it carried a subtle edge. Almost a warning. She remained only a minute before leaving again. Once the door closed, nobody spoke immediately. Then Ethan released a slow breath. She knows. James looked troubled. Knows what? Ethan turned toward us. That we are getting close to something. The words settled heavily over the room. For days, we had been collecting fragments. Missing files. Secret meetings. Altered records. Strange behavior. Now the pieces were beginning to connect. And for the first time, I realized the truth might be much closer than we thought. Because people only become nervous when the secret they are protecting is in danger of being uncovered. The following evening, the entire family gathered for dinner. It was the first time in days that everyone had been seated together beneath the massive crystal chandelier in the dining room. The long oak table stretched across the room like a silent witness. Outside, darkness covered the estate. Inside, the atmosphere felt carefully controlled. Too controlled. David sat beside Isabel, though he seemed increasingly distracted. Ethan arrived carrying nothing but a small notebook. Harrison occupied his usual place near the far end of the table. As always, he appeared uninterested in the conversation around him. Yet I had learned not to underestimate silence. Sometimes silence observed more than words ever could. The meal began normally. Discussions about business, local events, charity commitments. Nothing unusual. Isabel guided the conversation with effortless confidence, steering topics away whenever they drifted toward legal matters or family records. Then Ethan asked a simple question. Has anyone reviewed the trust amendments filed over the last 18 months? The effect was immediate. Forks paused. Glasses stopped moving. David looked up from his plate. Isabel maintained her smile, but only barely. Why would you ask? That, she replied. Ethan shrugged. Curiosity. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Thomas Grayson entered the dining room unexpectedly. He had been invited for dessert and coffee. At least that was the official explanation. As he took his seat, I noticed something unusual. He looked tired. Not physically tired. Burdened. Like a man carrying information he no longer wanted to keep. Isabel quickly redirected attention toward him. Thomas has been helping review several administrative matters, she said smoothly. Nothing particularly exciting. Ethan glanced toward the attorney. Actually, I find trust agreements very interesting. Thomas adjusted his glasses. The room grew noticeably quieter. Even David seemed uncomfortable. Then something happened that nobody expected. Harrison spoke. It was only one sentence. Calm. Direct. Interesting enough to remove documents. Every head turned toward him. Harrison rarely participated in family discussions. When he did, people listened. Thomas froze. Isabel's expression changed for the briefest moment. Not anger. Not fear. Something closer to alarm. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, Thomas cleared his throat. I believe there may be misunderstandings regarding certain records. Ethan leaned forward. Then help us understand. No one touched their food anymore. No one cared about dinner. The conversation had reached a point where polite distractions could no longer hide the truth. For the first time, Isabel appeared uncertain. For the first time, Thomas seemed trapped between loyalty and honesty. And for the first time, everyone at that table understood that whatever secret had been buried within the Whitmore family records was about to come into the open. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence around the dining table felt heavier than anything that had been said all evening. Thomas Grayson looked down at his hands before finally lifting his eyes toward the family. For years, he had been the trusted guardian of legal matters connected to the Whitmore estate. Tonight, that trust appeared to weigh heavily on him. There is something all of you deserve to know, he said quietly. Isabel immediately straightened in her chair. Thomas, she began, but he gently raised a hand. For the first time since I had known him, he interrupted her. No, this has gone on long enough. Across the table, David stared in disbelief. Ethan remained completely still. Harrison sat with the same calm expression he had worn all evening, as though he had already anticipated what would happen next. Thomas reached into his briefcase and removed a thin folder. The missing agreement was real, he said, and it was never intended to remain hidden permanently. The room seemed to shrink around those words. David looked from Thomas to Isabel. What agreement? Thomas opened the folder. Several years ago, your grandfather established a supplemental provision within the family trust. It contained conditions regarding control of certain family assets. Ethan leaned forward. Why was it removed? Thomas hesitated. Then he answered, because the agreement transferred significant authority away from a single individual and required broader family oversight. No one needed him to explain further. Every person at the table understood exactly why such a document might become inconvenient. David slowly turned toward Isabel. Her confidence had finally disappeared. Not completely, but enough. You knew about this? He asked. Isabel remained silent. That silence became its own answer. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Harrison finally set down his coffee cup. The soft sound echoed through the room. The estate was never the real issue, he said. Every eye turned toward him. The problem was control. His voice remained calm, measured, certain. People fight over money because they believe it gives them power. What they forget is that trust matters more. Once trust is gone, everything else eventually follows. David lowered his eyes. Ethan sat back in his chair. Even Thomas appeared relieved, as though a burden he had carried for years had finally been released. As for me, I looked around the dining room and realized how much had changed since that night when I first saw a secret meeting through a partially open library door. The truth had not destroyed the family. The secrecy had. Outside, the estate remained exactly as it always had. The same stone walls, the same grounds, the same history. But inside, something important had shifted. The hidden records would be restored. The missing agreement would be reviewed. Decisions would no longer be made in shadows. And as the family slowly rose from the table that evening, I understood something my late husband had known all along. Secrets could survive for years, sometimes even decades. But eventually, every secret reaches the day it can no longer hide.